The following presentation is part of the Beyond the Blast Doors network.
This is Pete Fletzer. On this episode of Around the Galaxy, we are joined by visual effects artist Yoshi Vu. Join us as we talk about breaking into VFX, working on the Death Star for Rise of Skywalker, and the power of being part of Star Wars. So strap yourselves in, relax, and enjoy this journey around the galaxy.
Player, we're having a roast.
Why we're here?
Good.
I'm in New Orleans, where kind of beautiful
First time I've ever talked.
he's going, hey, you know.
So Yoshi, thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's all my pleasure. So I know you've had the opportunity to be on a couple different podcasts lately, but for those that don't know you, maybe a quick little introduction. What is it you do as a video effects artist, and also you're also an actor as well, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm a visual effects artist. My primary title is 3D generalist, which means I basically do a little bit of everything, jack of all trades, if you will. But my specialty is hard surface and environment modeling, which basically means anything with robots, spaceships, anything like that. That's all me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. As far as the acting stuff, that's more. I wouldn't say it's something I pursue actively.
Right.
It's more of, once in a while I'm helping a friend out on set or something. They go, "Hey, some guy didn't show up. You want to help out?" Yeah, no problem. Why not? So, but cool. I did recently get cast as a voice actor in an upcoming video game, so that's a new one.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's, I'd listened to you on a couple other shows, and you do have a very, very strong sounding voice, so it's very cool. That's really cool.
Well, thank you.
What kind of a video game is it?
It's not a type of game I play. It's called a visual novel, I guess, which is a genre I'm not really familiar with, to be honest. So my understanding is it's kind of like a point and click adventure, choose your own adventure book or something like that. So cool. I will be playing a surgeon or something like that, I think.
Yeah, I can just show up and read the lines and do it well, right?
Yeah, that's all I need to do. They made sure to tell me too. They said, "This is a coincidence. It wasn't on purpose, but your character is Asian." I'm like, okay, I don't care. It's okay.
That's funny. So the connection directly to Star Wars for you is you did work on both the Rise of Skywalker and the Mandalorian. So
yes.
And if I have it right, I think you worked mostly on the Death Star scene, and in Mando you worked in the episode
4.
I think it was episode 4, right? Yes, episode
yes.
4 with the Atsd and that sort of thing. So
yes.
So maybe before we get to that, because that's really cool, and I want to ask you a couple questions about that. But you're a Marine, so you've had a journey to become a visual effects artist. So
oh yeah,
maybe tell me a little bit about the journey to get to where you are, and maybe even before that, let me ask you the role that Star Wars may have played in that. Like, what's some of your earlier Star Wars memories, and did being a Star Wars fan impact you going into this business?
I would say yes, 100%. I mean, it wasn't the only reason, but it was the end goal. I always wanted to join the military, and it was obviously a good way to pay for college, and that's one of the many reasons I joined. I actually worked in a warehouse for a while, stacking boxes at Best Buy in one of their warehouses. And one of my friends, David, he's one of my best friends. He worked in a Death Star with me. He actually sat next to me at Lucasfilm for episode 9 and for Mandalorian. But he was, showing me a YouTube show, and it was a guy called the Angry Video Game Nerd, and I'm like, wow, this guy's just making videos in his basement, and he has a huge following, and he's doing what he loves. I mean, why am I working in a warehouse? Like I should go pursue what I love. And at the time, I had already graduated from college. I joined the military, paid for college, went through, graduated, couldn't really find work. And I guess I just kind of gave up. It was one of those, like many people, oh, I couldn't find a job. Maybe I'll, go find something else. So it wasn't until I saw him, my friend David, he started working on Green Lantern, the movie, and he was working on another movie called Journey to the Mysterious Island. and he basically got me into it because when I saw that guy do the YouTube videos, I immediately, was inspired. Like, okay, you know what? I lit up on my dreams. Let's get back to it. And I went back and I started modeling a 3D DeLorean just for
Cool.
fun. I love Back to the Future. So I guess somebody at one of the studios that my friend David was working at saw it on his screen and said, "Who's that guy? Bring him in." So that was kind of the start, and they brought me in, and yeah, the first movie I ever worked on was Journey to the Mysterious Island and Green Lantern. So
that's cool.
It's
it's so important, and I think and at the risk of getting a little bit cheesy, but I think it's kind of important. I think you hear a story like that, you hear even my story when I made it. The way I ended up doing writing for Star Wars Galaxy magazine was I made a phone call to Lucasfilm and ended up talking to Steve Sansweet. Next thing you know, it's a similar situation, right? It's, hey, you write, let me see what you do, and that's how it gets there. Your buddy who did that DeLorean, let's see what else he can do. And I think it's really I think we often forget that. And I don't want to get philosophical too much, but I think it's really important to always kind of remember, like, that's the thing, is if you love doing something, just go for it. Because I look at your IMDb list, and basically, if you listen to this podcast, you probably are a fan of multiple things on that list. You've worked on Marvel. You've worked on you worked on what I find is one of the most underrated shows, Love, Death, and Robots, which I thought was fantastic. What did you do on that show? That was
it wasn't my idea, but the team I was on, it was the team's idea. They concepted the show and came up with the entire concept. It was Tim Miller, who was the boss at Blur Studio while I was there, and him and was it David Fincher, right? Or they came up with the concept for the show. Right. From my understanding, it was originally conceived as a continuation of like a heavy metal.
Yes. Yep.
But I think quickly they figured out that it would be better to do their own IP. So that's basically what happened. Is like, okay, let's bring all the different visual effects studios together. So there's many studios working on that, and let's let the artist do something.
Right.
And so that's why every episode is a different style, a different story. And so what I did was, and it's probably obvious by now, but I worked on an episode called Shapeshifters. It was the Marines.
Oh, yep.
So cool. Obviously, right?
right. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's and it's one of those shows that, like you said, it's really. I think I love stuff like that where it gives the artist that opportunity, and I think that's one of the things. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what goes into the visual effects work that you do, because it's really interesting, and I've just started noticing this, that there's like a different style that comes in. I think especially when you talk about some of the 3D reality kind of things that you're building, especially if you're doing surfaces and landscapes, you definitely see a different style from artist to artist and studio to studio. Where does that I mean, if you were to do, I was watching your 3D reel, and there's a cop car that goes under an overpass, and if you told me that if I would never have believed, or I never would have thought that it wasn't an actual overpass that they went under. But so what is it? What differentiates somebody like you from another visual effects artist? What makes me hire you as a studio versus somebody else? Is it, it's an interesting, it strikes me as interesting because it does look, it's all similar, but once you start to look at it, they're very different styles.
It's hard to explain beyond saying that when it's something to do with your craft, you can notice little nuances that tell you a lot about the individual that other people who aren't in that field might not pick up on. Right. For example, I use an example of a chef. They might eat a meal, and what show was it? There's a show I think on Hulu or Netflix where a guy eats a meal blindfolded and then he tries to recreate it. And it's amazing. Yeah, he'll say like, "Oh, these taste like tomatoes, but I think they were fried lightly before being baked and then made into a sauce." And I'm thinking, how do you know that? Like, and I think it's the same way with CG or visual effects in general. I can look at someone's reel and right away, within a few minutes, I can tell you exactly what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, how they're trying to cover up their weaknesses with their strengths, or, something along those lines. And I can only assume that when I apply for a job, they look at my reel and look at the same thing. which is why when you look at different reels, we show the breakdown. We show how we came about the process. Like we show our topology. It shows that like one of my biggest strengths at every studio is my topology, which means the way my geometry flows. So the way, you know, like the polygons, I structure my polygons in a very specific way that they flow right. I don't want to say right because it's not like someone else is doing it wrong, but they flow the same way. If I made a person and you looked at the topology, all the lines, I try to make them flow the same way your muscles would flow.
Right.
That way, when I work at it and I don't have the textures on it or I have to break it apart, just looking at the way the topology flows, I can tell what part I'm looking at and where I'm at on my asset.
Okay.
And that's just the way I like to work. And I think that might be one of the reasons that I get brought in for these types of projects. I get brought in a lot for hard surface, which, as you see, I did like the vehicle for the Orville. And then you know, the underpass. So I do a lot of hard surface, meaning man-made objects.
Okay.
That's my specialty. So
that's cool.
And everybody has their own style. The closest thing I could relate it to is practical effects. Tom Savini, Phil Tippett, they all, even though they're all going for realistic, they all kind of have their own little style. If you notice, you look at like Tom Savini's blood and gore, you're like, he likes his a little more vibrant, you know, things like that. So
yeah, you can definitely tell a Winston werewolf versus somebody else's, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Same kind of thing. Yeah, that's really cool. And so how do you end up going from getting a gig at Lucasfilm? Obviously you apply and you go through that process, but how was it, what was the process to start working for Lucasfilm?
It was about 8 years and I don't know, maybe 300 rejections. It's funny because I get a lot of people asking me on social media, you know, they'll DM me or message me like, how do you get in? And I've been trying, and the only thing I can say is I guarantee you I've been turned down more times for one studio than you've even tried for all of them. I mean, I don't know what else to say. And just because you get turned down doesn't mean you shouldn't try again. It just means you're not good enough yet. And that's a lot of things I try to tell a lot of young artists and even older artists, I guess sometimes. But I've seen a lot of people, you know, they make excuses for themselves. They'll say like, oh, maybe I don't want to use this right now. This is probably the bad time to use it, but maybe they're racist, or maybe they're sexist, or maybe you know, they could come up with all these different reasons, or maybe they just don't like me, or maybe there's someone there that doesn't like me. All these different reasons, and I can tell you based on my experience, yes, that can happen, but the odds of it happening are very, very slim because it's not one person making the decision. There's been plenty of times where someone tells me like, oh, what do you think of this guy? And I'll go, well, I don't like him, but he's very, very talented. You know, and in the end, the goal is to make something that we are proud of.
Right.
So, and I have a lot of people say like, oh, well, you know, Disney turned me down and this person turned me down, and I'll show them an example. I'm like, well, this is a person who's real I looked at recently and we brought on board. And they'll say, well, how can I compete with that? That person's just, that's amazing. I go, well, yes, that's why they were hired. It's amazing, you know, and unfortunately, I didn't start off at Disney. You know what I mean? I had to work my way up. It took me almost the 10th year of my career to even get an interview.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of these young artists, they think like, oh, you know, I want to work for Disney. Well, yeah, so does everyone else. Everyone wants to work for ILM. Yeah, everyone wants to work for Weta. You're competing with hundreds of thousands of other people that, I'm sorry, have, you know, like myself recently, 10 years plus experience on you. So
Right.
It is what it is.
How did you find working for Lucasfilm versus other effects houses, ILM versus other?
So it was exciting and disappointing at the same time. I guess it would be the studio equivalent of meeting your heroes.
Right.
You know, it's like I expected to go in and I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought stormtroopers were going to escort me to my death that was levitating above, you know, Mustafar or something. I don't know, but you know,
that would have been pretty cool. But
it would have been. But you know, that's the idea I had in my head. It was supposed to be this amazing, unbelievable thing, and of course, you know, I went to the San Francisco office first. You know, that was amazing. Of course, I'm sure you've been there. It's It's not even like a studio. It's like a museum of geekness. Yeah. But
it's it's mind-boggling, and to just walk into the ranch and just to see. And when I was there, it was a long time ago in a galaxy not so far away. It was interesting to me because it still wasn't as much a museum at the time. It was very, in fact, there was only one little hallway that had
Oh, wow.
props. Yeah. So this was like 20 years ago. But you're walking into magic. Now you walk into there and you're met with the Yoda statue and you have all the other things going on. So you went in for the interview, and I imagine that's one you walk out and you're like, gosh, I hope this works out.
Well, my interview was over the phone. So I did it over the phone. I just went in to take care of some things. I met up with some friends that work there too, so it was nice. But like you said, it's surreal walking in. It was a surreal situation, and it was pretty much exactly what I thought it was. But I was assigned to the Singapore office, and at first I'm thinking like, oh no, I want to work in the San Francisco office.
Right.
That's where everybody knows. That's Lucasfilm. But they go, well, the Death Star is being made in Singapore. And I'm like, okay, give me a ticket. I'll go to Singapore.
So you were working in Singapore?
Yes, I was in Singapore for 5 or 6 months.
Holy cow! Wow.
Yeah.
So let's.
And my wife was pregnant at home too.
Oh my gosh! Were you home for the baby or?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a tough one, because when I got the contract offer, I looked at her and she was already pregnant. And I'm like, oh no, what do we do? And she goes, this is your lifelong dream. I'm like, yeah, but now I have a baby on the way.
Yeah.
And so thankfully we talked to the doctor, and I was in the military before there, so they really liked that, I guess, because they said that, we usually don't induce unless it's for military, but because your husband is working overseas, he was in the military before, I think we can kind of consider this maybe a similar situation. So what we can do is we can induce, so that way he can schedule a flight home for the 2 weeks or whatever. So we did that, and I called Lucasfilm, and I was a little nervous, we talked about contract, all that, and I kind of waited until everything was done and said, okay, when can you start? Before I said, well, I do have one thing. And I said, I have a baby on the way due, this week, and I have to go home for that, and that's non-negotiable. And they just went, yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah,
and I was like,
that's good.
Oh, okay. I mean, I didn't think it would be. I mean, I feel like you'd look like kind of a jerk if you said no, but so I did fly home for that, and it worked out perfectly, because I flew home on the 9th. Okay, I got home on the 9th. We went into the hospital on the 10th, and she was born on the 11th of August.
Awesome.
So it was perfect. So I spent the rest of my time home with her, and because I was jet lagged, it worked out, because she would sleep during the day, and
you were at the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I would sleep during the day, and she would be awake and all that. So, and my daughter was born on August 11th, which I thought was pretty ironic, because my job in the Marine Corps was field artillery, which is 0811.
Oh wow!
So yeah, so she was born in 0811.
Cool. That's awesome.
And then I flew back home, and they had a gift package waiting for me with a baby onesie that said Lucasfilm on it, and like a gift package and all that. So a card signed by the team, the whole shebang.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so it's always very cool when people understand the human side, right? You always do feel like when you do meet your heroes, like you said, it never there. What I always find really interesting, whether I'm meeting an actor or anybody, a celebrity, you realize at a certain point that they just happen to have a cool job, right? And it's cool that Lucasfilm was good about that. So you found out you were working on the Death Star. What did you know about the story at the time? Did you know anything about this? Okay, so all you knew was
nothing.
You're gonna go and do hard surface for Death Star, and you were like, what was your response? I mean, other than I'll go do it, but
I mean, what other response could I have, right? Like, yes, 100%. And it was.
But did your mind start like thinking like, oh, what's this movie going to be about? What's going to happen there? Or you were just like, all right.
I tried not to think about it, because that's one of the issues, and I think I mentioned it in another podcast too. But I refer to it as a double-edged sword. Like, yes, I get to be a part of Star Wars and all the different franchises that I love, and like I said, you mentioned you looked at my IMDb. That's kind of been my roadmap for life. Is I want to work on everything I loved as a kid. So I've worked on Star Trek, Star Wars, so. Finally getting to work on the Death Star, I'm at a loss for words right now just thinking about it. It doesn't even seem real that it happened. It's like, okay, well, thank you.
So how does the process work when you're doing the effects for it? Are you seeing the actors in place at this point in the process where you were?
Well, so some of my shots, they didn't really have actors in it. They did, but its plates, they're not really moving. But for the Death Star, usually the way it worked was they would the supervisor, the art director, wonderful guy by the way, named Dan Wheaton. He was also a supervisor on Ready Player One. He's awesome. But
Cool.
yeah, he would have things blocked out for me. So they would hand me a scene. It'd have like a giant cube and a giant thing sticking out here, and like, okay, this is kind of give you an idea of what we're going for.
Right.
I mean, the closest thing I can imagine is if they built the set for you digitally using Legos and Lego Technics and say, okay, this is kind of the idea we want, and you go, okay, and you go in, and I do get some creative freedom as a senior artist, which I'm very grateful for. So that helps too, and it allows me some creative freedom to try things. Of course, it doesn't always mean it's going to go in. I have to go into dailies, and the art director has to approve it, and then. But if he does and he likes it, we send it up to Mr. Abrams, and if he likes it, then we're golden.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So you were told. So you created part of which sections? I mean, which sections of the Death Star were seen? Obviously, they knew set wise where it was going to be, but you created the detail of those areas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, not all of them. I did have like junior artists helping me. It's weird because I've been in those shoes before, where they're making this entire cool scene, and they tell you, well, we need you to put some debris here and some cables here. So you're doing, the little stuff,
right?
That senior artist doesn't have time for because they got to focus on the big picture. So the shots I did were it's pretty much most of it is when you see the skiff going into the mouth of the ruins, I guess.
Yep.
That's all my shot. I did the wreckage, the lighting, the textures. I had some help on the detailing from another guy named Asir. And then we had of course, the amazing water team fill in the rest.
Yeah.
I did not do the water. That is beyond me as a generalist. I mean, I can give you some splashes, but that's about it.
So, all right. So cool. So you did going into Death Star.
Yeah. And then the immediately following shot where the camera pans in and you see Rey climbing up the little pillar, which, if you notice, is the same type of pillar that Obi-Wan turns down the shield generator on in A New Hope.
I'm now gonna have to look. So did you reference that?
Intentional.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm gonna check that out.
It was intentional. It's on the first poster, actually. There's fighting on it, but
okay.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where obviously I didn't build everything from scratch. That would just be ridiculous and take forever. But we did you might be familiar, we call it kit bashing, which is very similar to how they built the original Death Star using model kits back then, except we're doing it digitally now. I'm breaking up pieces of other things and putting them together and taking what I need. But everything in the foreground I decided to make because I knew it was going to be close to the camera and I knew it had to hold up. And I remember when I had the book here with me too. Actually, it's the Star Wars, vehicles cross sections.
Oh yeah, yep.
So that's why it's getting a little dark, but if you pause it, you can see the cooling tubes in the fins and in the wing. And it's because I made sure to make everything as accurate as possible to the actual functional design. And I'm sitting there and I'm making the TIE fighter. I'm breaking up the wings and putting the tubes in there. And I remember one of my coworkers says, we have a library you can pull the TIE fighter from. And I'm saying, yeah, I know, but I want to look back years later and say, I did this.
Yeah. That's cool.
Not I put it together. I made it.
I created it. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was, that was a really important scene for me as a fan because it revisited a section, while we didn't see all those pieces in the Death Star
I tried.
But what we saw was it brought you right back. Like you were immediately there. And, I don't think it was a piece you did, but like just the Stormtrooper armor laying around in the hallways and like you said, the TIE fighter that you put together it brought you right into that moment, which is so very cool. Very cool. So you, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say originally, it didn't work out visually. I was a little bummed, but do you remember the command consoles? Everybody knows, right? The round ones with the separate panels. So originally, instead of the TIE fighter on the right side of the scene, it was a destroyed command console.
Okay. Oh, cool.
But I just, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You want it to work. You really try to make it work, just as an extra Easter egg. But it didn't make sense in the context of where it was sitting. Why is there a TIE fighter wrecked there? So we ended up changing it. And if you look in the back, I put like the the TIE Fighter hangar brackets that hold them, so you can kind of see pieces of that. So you got to make it have logical sense based on where it is in the Death Star. And of course, if you watch the behind the scenes, I don't know if they actually put it in there or not. I was there for the recording of it, but we go over how we laid it out, what pieces where. We had to have a map because everything had to make sense. For example, my friend David, he worked mostly on the exterior shots.
Okay.
So all the fin running out in the water and them fighting on the I guess you can call it a bridge.
Yep.
But my friend David, he's the one that made the Death Star partial sphere you see in the background.
Oh, wow.
And I made the interior of it because I was in charge of the inside anyway. So he would do the outside and I'd give him pieces for the inside that would, stick out. So if you notice, there's a scene where Rey is running to Kylo Ren's ship.
Mm-hmm.
My friend David, speaking of, things that bring you back, he put part of the entrance scaffolding for the Death Star 2. If you can see it sticking out of the water, the red scaffolding that goes around the entrance, you'll see it sticking out of the water. And I think originally we were going to put more of the ring,
right?
But we just kept thinking like, this thing should be way more in pieces than this. We saw it get pretty much obliterated. Like, it wouldn't make sense. It just wouldn't make sense to be that intact. You got to ride that fine line of how much do you keep intact that it's recognizable to the fans,
right?
But you don't break the reality of it. And that's and there's no winning with that, as you probably know. Everybody has a comment.
right Some people are gonna love it, some people not so much, but like you said, that's and again, I think that kind of goes back to one of the earlier points we were talking about, is that's what you as the artist get to bring to it, is you get to have those conversations and
exactly
make some decisions, which is really
like you were bringing up the Stormtrooper armor and helmets and stuff sitting around.
Yep.
So obviously we had a library of that, and so we were sticking stuff in. But I remember having a conversation with one of my coworkers. I looked over and go, "Wait a minute, how long has this stuff been here?" It's a while. I go, "So wouldn't there be bones or human remains inside these Stormtrooper armor and helmets?" And he goes, "Yeah, I guess there would be." He goes, "Yeah, but that's a little gruesome." that's a bit much.
When you work on Walking Dead, you can put it in there, but
yeah, I mean, so it goes back to what you're saying. It's like you make a decision that's probably better not to do it that way. It just wouldn't. We don't need it. You don't need it.
Right. That's pretty cool, though.
I don't need a skull rolling out of a helmet. That just...
Well, yeah. I mean, that would be cool. It's sort of like the I don't know if it's true or not, but like when Jango Fett's head gets chopped off in Attack of the Clones, allegedly you can see a shadow of his
head coming out
of the helmet. That's pretty cool. A little subtle, but
just enough to get the point across.
Right, yeah. I'm bringing my 7-year-old son to see Rise of Skywalker. I don't know if he needs to see the zombie troopers, but that would be but that's great. So now from there you went on to do some work for Mandalorian.
Yes. I wasn't officially on that show, which is why I don't even think my name is in the credits for that.
Okay.
Because I was officially assigned to Rise of Skywalker. It was more of like, oh, hey, we need some help. Who's available? Whose workload is, at a good spot? So, jump over and help for a bit. And that's kind of what it was. They needed help with they call it the impossible task, which no pressure. They handed it to me, and I remember the supervisor said to me, this is an impossible task. We have no reference. The only reference we have is the same shot from another angle, but it's out of focus. So basically it was a shot where one of the shots was where the Mando, he takes his helmet off and he puts it down. He's eating. You see through the window. He's talking to a woman earlier in the same scene.
Yep.
So when you look out the window, originally there's nothing there. It was a green screen.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, okay, there's a village out there. I'm like, what does it look like? Oh, we don't know. What do the huts look like? We don't have that ready yet. It's like, so I had to base it off of the little that I could find. And this is unfortunately how it goes sometimes. But being a generalist, I started just doing it. And I remember the supervisor came out and, he's like, yeah, this is an impossible task. If you can't do it, I'll back you up. It is what it is. Just do what you can, cobble what you can together. I ended up, and they kept it. It's in the final show. But aside from the people and a little bit of the building and ground in the center, everything else is a matte painting.
Okay.
I had to matte paint it because there were no CG buildings available yet. They weren't complete, if I recall. And I mean, I didn't have access to anything else, so I had to revert back to an old skill set and paint it. And I remember the supervisor came out and he goes, "How did you do this?" And I said, "Oh, I just painted it. There's no other way. I had to go back to the basics." And
Right.
he said, "Well, I have notes." And he starts giving me all these notes, like make the hut this way, change this. And I'm thinking, like, what happened to the impossible task? And
Yeah.
I'll back you up.
Where
And
was
he,
this stuff?
yeah, and thankfully it was kind of it was the best backhanded compliment I ever got. But he says, "Well, you obviously have the skill set for it, so make it happen. Adjust the notes." I'm like, okay, whatever. But so it's funny because if you look in the shot, there's a hut on the right side that has a straw roof. I referenced, I think, a hula skirt for that. There's like a fabric awning, and I think for that I referenced a hammock from like an Amazon picture, and I just kind of looked at that and painted it because it was kind of getting the folds and shadows and little
Right.
things like that. So I really had to kind of just adapt. And the other shot I worked on was, of course, the Atsd attack sequence
Oh,
with
cool.
Cara Dune when she pops up out of the water. That's a CG environment that she's in. It's not how it really was. She was actually in the water, and there was grass and dirt, but it wasn't
Right.
laid out and shaped like that. They wanted it a very specific way.
Oh, okay.
So
So
yeah.
now how do you feel about things like, or what impact does something like the volume have? I'm sure you've been, keeping an eye on that as a technology, and is that something that you would work beforehand on? Would you, based on
What are you referring to? I'm sorry.
the volume, the was it the 270-degree digital set
Oh,
that you've been working on? Yeah.
yeah. Unfortunately, I didn't work on any shots involving that for me,
No,
so
no,
I didn't. Yeah.
yeah, but now would the kind of work that you do be placed into the volume in the future, perhaps, or
I don't
are you
really know.
post-production? Okay.
I'm post, but I kind of understand how it works. It's the easiest way. Let me see how the best way to explain it. So when you have a CG element, you have to light it the same way that the real environment is lit, which is why you see sometimes in reference they have those chrome balls they
Yep.
bring out, and
Mhm.
that's so we can see exactly what's being reflected from all angles and where the light sources are, so that we can properly light the CG assets. Now, when it comes to the other way around, a CG environment with a live asset or a person, how do you do it? How do
Mhm.
you light them properly? So the way they kind of came up with was basically put a CG environment up on screens around them. That
Right.
way, if there's a sun there, it'll light them, and everything works correctly. So if I understand correctly, I think the technology was first used to great effect in Gravity.
Mhm.
I think they had the actors on some kind of rig. Instead of spinning them around, they had screens around them, and they would spin the screens,
Oh,
so
wow.
that way the lights would react properly. And when you look at it in the movie, it's actually affecting everything the way it should in real life.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so I mean, the effects world is changing fairly rapidly. But let's go back one more time to the beginning. When was the first time you saw Star Wars, and what's some of your first early memories of the franchise?
So the irony is that I think me and my friend David actually were introduced to Star Wars the same way, and you're probably gonna laugh, but it was through Muppet Babies.
Muppet
Uh,
Babies. Okay, how?
yeah.
Yes, I am gonna
So
laugh. How does that
Muppet
happen?
Babies uses clips from Star Wars in its intro.
It-
When they're singing the Muppet Baby songs,
right?
they splice in clips from Star Wars.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go
And
pull
yeah,
that
and
up.
during the show, they actually cut to clips of Star Wars all the time. They always make a reference to like R2 or C3PO, and it cuts to a clip from the movies of R2 responding.
Okay.
And I remember thinking like, what is that they keep showing me? And it was my parents, my dad. That I think the same thing happened to David too. Is like, no, that's Star Wars. Well, what is that? Well, we'll go to the. At the time, I was living in Texas, and it was a convenience store, not a convenience store, a grocery store called Randall's,
Okay.
and they had a little video section inside that you go in and rent a video for the weekend. So we went
Yep.
in and we rented Star Wars, and that was my first time ever seeing it, and
Oh,
I
wow.
was blown away. You know, laser swords, robots, spaceships. Like,
Right.
what more does a kid want?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. So it's really funny because it's Star Wars. Everybody has their own sort of entry into it, and that's one of my favorite things to talk to people about on the show here, is because it's interesting to me. I've referenced it a lot lately, but my excuse me, my 7-year-old son, he came in through Clone Wars. Like, he loves Clone Wars, so he doesn't. I don't even know if he's that in touch with the original trilogy. He's all about clones and Clone Wars, and that's his Star Wars. And
Yeah.
I was, I'm gonna be turning 50 this year, so I saw Star Wars in the theater on the big screen with my dad when I was 7 years old, and so just it's really cool. And there's something about it though, whether you're seeing a clip on Muppet Babies or seeing it in the theaters, it grabs you in a really, and it won't let you go. So the first was it A New Hope? Was that the first one that you watched?
It was A New Hope, yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my dad actually didn't know much about Star Wars. He just knew it was a Star Wars, so he took and he rented it, And I mean, I didn't know any better, but
Right.
My wife, obviously, the irony is my wife actually was not a Star Wars fan, and I don't think you could say she is now. She's not, and it wasn't until I finally worked on it that she sat down and watched all of them. And at the end of it all, because obviously I wanted her to watch 1 through 8.
Right.
And then we would go to the theaters to the screening to watch, what I worked on. So anyway, she watched all of them. And at the end of it, she told me, she's like, you know what? I like the last 3 way better than the original 3. Mm-hmm. And instead of telling her all the reasons she's wrong and Empire's the best ever, I just tried to accept that, hey, we both like Star Wars now. Let's just bond over this, as opposed to what apparently a lot of people on the internet do. You like that? I hate you. Don't follow me.
You could have in the car ride home just told your wife she was wrong about everything and just yelled at her and then blocked her. That's the way.
Yeah, right. On the way home from the theater, go. You like the new trilogy better? Unfollow me.
Well, you're wrong, and that's all you need to know. I'm not willing to discuss it. Forget.
Blocked.
Oh my gosh, it's such a strange world with that.
It is
with that sort of stuff, but
it's still happening with everything. You don't like Harry Potter? Blocked.
Right. But it's funny too, because I think there's this weird sort of Star Wars community belief that Star Wars is the only group of fans that is that intense about things. But boy, oh boy, if you go into any other fandom, you're going to find, Doctor Who fans who are like, if you like the third Doctor, or I know nothing about Doctor Who. But
go look at Trek fans and the Kelvin timeline versus the original. Oh man.
Trek fans started this. If the internet was around in the 80s and the 70s, they would have figured this whole thing out. That's pretty funny.
Let me see. Like they have people that speak Klingon, right? Is there anybody that speaks any Star Wars language fluently?
I don't know, but I will tell you with this, there are people that I know that can see the Star Wars language, the Urabesh, and they can read
Arabesh?
it fluently. Yeah,
I can read it.
You can. See, I can't even do that. I have to go and I have to pretend I'm in 3rd grade looking at the code.
But it is basically the alphabet. And once you look at it enough times, you start to oh, okay, that's this turned on its side and mirrored over. And yeah.
I mean,
I'm not good at it, but it'll take me a little bit to figure it out. But I can do it without a chart, given enough time.
All right, well, that's good. I wish I'd known. I would have given you a test. We could have. That's pretty funny. So, as a Star Wars fan going into working on this stuff, how did that? Obviously, like you were saying before, it's sort of the dream to do it. But you were saying that it was good news, bad news. What was it? What was it about it that was was it that it just felt like every other effects house you worked with?
Well, that's one of the things, is that it did, this is a major effects house, but that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like a major effects house, but it is very Star Wars oriented. I don't want to say it isn't, because when I got sent to Singapore and I went into the Lucasfilm building over there, which they call the Sandcrawler building. If you look it up online, if you Google Sandcrawler building, Lucasfilm, if you Google a Sandcrawler building at Lucasfilm, you'll see it's basically a giant glass sandcrawler.
Oh, wow.
And and when you go up the elevators and stuff, it's like going up elevators inside the Death Star. It's designed that way with the lights that the oval lights that and everything. So you go up and you're like, wow, this is a set. And you go in and there's statues and props. And then you go past all that and you sit down at your desk, and that area is just like any other office. And you're like, oh. Where are the droids serving me drinks? What's going on here?
When do I get to get my own lightsaber? Oh, you don't.
Where's my slave Leia? No, I'm kidding.
Oh, man. So what kind of projects are you working on now?
Currently, I work at Apple. I was originally slated to go back to Lucasfilm for Mandalorian Season 2, but unfortunately, with quarantine and flight restrictions, my contract was placed on hold.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is what it is. Nothing we can do about it. So I took a job. I took a local job for the time being. I can't really say what I'm working on, but I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure it out.
Yeah. So there's
I'm a 3D modeler there. I can say that.
Okay.
I design and make stuff.
We'll leave it there for you, but I think people should be able to figure that out a little bit, which is pretty wild. The other thing that I want to make sure I talked about, because the timing of this episode will be while it's still happening, you are doing a charity auction right now.
Oh, yes, I am.
You have it so that you have some of your are these are some of your personal items that, and
yes.
you're donating them all to
the
charity.
ACLU.
Yeah.
Yes.
To the ACLU, which is great. And it all ends, I think, Friday of this week, or maybe over the weekend. But you have some great stuff. You have the Mandalorian Season 1 video effects crew signed poster.
Yeah, that was my personal poster that originally I was going to keep for me as kind of like, a souvenir of accomplishing my dreams. And it's kind of the reason I chose to auction it. Because someone else asked me, don't you have more valuable items that would draw more money? I'm like, maybe, but for me, it's not just that. It's about showing that I'm willing to make a personal sacrifice for something I believe in. And obviously, as someone who served in the military, it's an ideology that I really can relate to. And it's unfortunate that, not to get too political, I don't want to get too political with this, but it's unfortunate that there are unreasonable people on all sides of every argument. Mm-hmm. And they cloud the argument itself. And unfortunately, I wish we could all think the same way, or think a positive way, I should say, because I don't want to act like I'm the only way of thinking. But I feel like as soon as you started attacking someone, ad hominem attacks and stuff, instead of intelligently debating, you immediately close them off. Because if someone calls me stupid or tells me, a bunch of insults, obviously I have less respect for them and say, oh, this is not a rational person. Why would I listen to them? And I think that's the best thing I can say is, yes, I'm supporting this particular charity because I believe in the cause. And if you don't agree, that's fine. I believe in freedom of speech. Everybody can think and say what they want. And it may be controversial, but I feel like even if someone says something extremely racist to me, I don't believe in, what is it? They call it doxing them, right? Like releasing all their. I don't believe in that. Right. I personally don't. It's no matter how hateful something they say is or how much I don't like it. I did serve, this country in order to protect the freedom of speech. So I may not like it, but I'll defend your right to say it as much as you want. But I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, freedom of speech also is the freedom not to listen to that speech. And
yes, exactly.
That's really important, and especially as you said in this current time, it's if you can't have a rational conversation, it's just not worth having.
Yeah, and I had a 3-hour conversation with someone online too, like not online, but from the internet. Mm-hmm. That was, let's just say, on an opposing side of my point of view.
Right.
And I reached out and I said, hey, I would love to speak to you. I'm sorry. I would love to speak to you. I'm trying to, hey, take it easy. I'm trying to understand your point of view, because I don't want to automatically denounce without understanding, why you do or do not support what you do or don't. Right. So I listened, and we made intelligent arguments, both sides, and it seems like that most of the things that both of us actually were against, when I heard the other side, it was like, oh, I didn't know that, you know what I mean? Or I'd say like, oh, for example, when I was in the military, I said, I saw some of my guys that I served with getting deported. Mm-hmm. And he goes, no, that doesn't happen. I'm like, it does, and he goes, I didn't know that. And that's just an example,
Right.
So my only advice I can give people is, I'm sure one you can agree with, is no matter what side you pick, please be open-minded. Read as much as you can about everything. Gather all info. Read all opposing views, views. Be as informed as you can before you make a decision. And that's the best I can say, because I see a lot of people blindly, oh, I'm supporting this or I'm hating this because they have a misunderstanding or misconception of it. And so, I mean, as you can see, I'm trying to stay like as neutral as possible.
I understand.
I mean, I obviously have a way that I lean, but I'd like to think of myself as open-minded and not criticizing of someone or hating of someone just because they don't share my views.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things that I'd seen, or not, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but somebody had said that if somebody doesn't encourage you to look into the details, then you have to wonder why, right? So if I'm if I'm taking my stand and not willing to understand where you come from, and I think that's we've seen it. If we a way to discuss it without getting too deep into politics is that you can look at what's happening in the Star Wars social media and continues to happen and just won't go away, is just the conversations about you didn't like The Last Jedi, or you did like The Last Jedi, or you liked Rise of Skywalker or didn't, and people make a decision about you as a person based on that, and that's that makes no sense to me, and I think it's indicative of the challenge we have now with politics and race and everything that's happening is
those separatists, man.
Well, people just dig in, right? Like and become so
vindictive.
I think vindictive, and social media makes it so easy for me to sit behind a keyboard and say something that I would probably never say to somebody to their face, and it gets ugly. But hey, that's why we have Star Wars movies, so that we can escape a little bit of the reality. Right. I guess maybe, I don't know. Well, maybe now would be a good time to go into our 10 questions segment, and
absolutely
get a little bit of the Yoshi point of view on these 10 questions. So, and there's no wrong answers, although people may judge you on what you say.
Well, what else is different?
What else is
different? It's the internet.
That's right. That's what we do.
I can order fries, and somehow that could lead down a rabbit hole where I'm called a Nazi. I don't know. That's just how the internet works.
You say that like it's happened.
Oh, I've been called. It's weird because it wasn't even related to anything I posted. I can tell you, it's nothing political. It was I think a gentleman put on an Army National Guard uniform, and he wasn't in the National Guard, and took a live real rifle and fell into formation with the National Guard.
Wow.
With live rounds, and thankfully they caught him and arrested him.
Right.
But he was basically trying to infiltrate the National Guard, and I found out he was also a military consultant. He had consulted for several video game commercials and stuff, like Ubisoft. He did the Ghost Recon commercials, and so I just tweeted out, like, hey, Ubisoft, this guy's a fraud. I'm a real veteran, and I have background in film and television and video games. I'll gladly take his place. And someone said, oh, and they responded, said, oh, and you completely ignore the conveniently placed bricks because it doesn't support your liberal Nazi agenda. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know how to take this.
Right. How did you make that leap? Yeah.
I almost wanted to respond and say, I love you too.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for noticing, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. It's, it just makes it very, I would love to say, it's right. I would love to say that I've figured out the way to ignore it, but even on I've literally woken up in the morning and looked at social media and gone, today is not going to be the day I'm going to get involved, and by noon I've gotten involved.
Yeah. So, I got much. I'm usually one of my good friends actually mentioned this. He says, you're usually pretty stoic about these things. You don't really get involved. You have your opinions, but I'm like, yeah, it's. I usually don't, but I don't know why this time it hit me harder than ever, and it was bothering me, and I was literally in the corner, almost in tears. Like this is the country I chose to fight for, and it's tearing itself apart. It breaks my heart. And my wife says, "Do you think maybe you care more now because you have a daughter?" I'm like, "Yeah, maybe." She's like, "You're selling all the stuff that you said you were going to leave to her," and I told my friend that I'm like, yeah, I was going to leave this to her, but I think this is more important. And he's the one that told me. He said, well, you're trying to leave her a better world instead of some posters, and I think she can understand that. And I'm like, wow, that sounds like a Hallmark card, man. That's
Yeah.
but
Well,
thank you.
well, it's very true. I mean, I now have two kids myself, and I look at my politics a little bit differently than I would in the
Yeah.
past. And I look at it really does it changes you, and and I think in 99% of the time it makes people make better
Yeah.
decisions, which is great.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I was saying before, and which you agreed on is, doing your research.
Yep.
When people say, "Oh, they're going to defund the police," and at first I'm like, "What does that mean? What is that bad?" Of course, a lot of people hear that and they're like, "That's terrible." I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm just saying I
Right.
had to look into it and research.
Right.
What does this really mean? And in my research, I'm not going to go any further than saying that I didn't realize it's happened in the U.S. already before in several cities.
Yep.
That where the police was completely defunded and restructured. I had no idea. I'm
Hmm.
like, wow, that's, and I also found out that we had segregated proms this decade in the United States.
Oh my
This
God.
decade, I can't believe it. Like it sounds so illegal, but I look it up, and it's basically like, oh, the school is holding a prom, but some of the parents are paying for a private prom, and they're holding it on a country club, but they're saying, oh, it was private because we just wanted our kids. But if you really look at it, it was a cop out.
Yeah.
Because you look at the school prom, the one the school held, and I think they said there were like 14 kids, and it was all the minority kids.
Mm-hmm.
But then the private prom held on the country club was all the non-minority kids that were invited by the parents. Yeah, and I'm like, wow, this still exists. It bothers me, like how is this decade? This makes no sense to me. And
well, but it's people wonder what they can do to help, and I think it's really important to know that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be donating $100 million like
the Korean
Michael
group,
Jordan,
right?
and or whoever, but doing what you, and I this is why I'm going to make sure that that we make sure people know where to find this eBay auction, because every little bit makes a difference, I think. And
yeah, I agree.
And it's impressive that you've decided that you want to give up some of your own personal things, and it's inspired me as well. I want to look at what I can do a little bit differently. So
yeah, I was about to pull my episode 9 poster off the wall, and my wife was like, hold on, take it easy, like slow down, let the other ones go first, let it auction off, see how he does. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Because she said this one has a lot of personalized messages.
Oh, okay.
Like my friend David, he wrote on there in gold Sharpie, "Congratulations, Yoshi, you caught your dragon." So my wife is like, I don't think anybody's gonna want that on their poster.
yeah. No, there's and you know what, that is the other thing that happens when you have kids too, is I had a box of Star Wars action figures in the basement unopened that I was like, I'm gonna sell, and now, but with my kids, I'm like, I think I'm gonna hang on to those and pass them along to them, or just because it means something a little bit differently. But
yeah, I told my wife too, I'm gonna make a bunch of like Death Star 2 prints and just sign them and seal them up in like an ammo can or something.
Yeah.
And I told her, if anything happens to me, maybe these will be worth something. I don't know.
Right.
Especially if I'm gone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, gosh, I hope not. I mean, I'm not going to say that I may or may not be actively bidding on a couple things in there that, just I hope, look, I want to make sure you get as much money for this as possible, but I don't want to be totally outbid.
I'll hook you up with something. Don't worry. I'll give you your own private something or other,
my own private,
as well as an extra copy for you to give off to your listeners as a prize, which I try to do. I try to do that with every podcast I get on, because it doesn't really cost me anything. It's just time, so why not? I think I'd be a jerk not to.
Well, that's cool. That's great, man. I really appreciate that. We'll put something in the show notes, and we'll put a little contest in there, and we'll have send it out. That would be so cool. I'm sure that'll make somebody's day. It would certainly make my day. Well, cool. All right, so let's do this. Let's do the 10 questions, and maybe what I'll do is I'll have let's do it this way. Let's do the contest this way. We'll have somebody, the listeners, DM me at ATGcast what your 10 answers were. We did, just short answers, and I'll pull from the people who get them all right, and then we'll send something out to them. That'll be cool.
Sounds good.
Good. That means that they've had to listen at least 55 minutes into the podcast. So that's good. All right. So let's start with this. What is your favorite Star Wars TV show, movie, or book? Your favorite of the favorites?
Empire.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of a given, I think.
Yeah. I was just asked this. I was on another podcast and they asked me the same question. And I was like, I guess there's a reason why we always go back to it.
If I had to go, if that was out of the question, though, because I know, I feel like that should be not allowed in Star Wars questions. It's just outside of Empire, what's your favorite? I would probably say Shadows of the Empire.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Awesome. That's great. Have you seen? There's a fan film that a guy.
I have not.
Together. It's not done yet. He's producing it now. I should hook you guys up. He could probably
hook me up.
It would be very cool. I actually, the very first author interview I did was Steve Perry, who wrote Shadows of the Empire back in the day. So yeah, that's a special one for me as well. Okay, so what's your least favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book?
The Clone Wars animated movie.
Yeah.
I love that little hutling. No, I'm good with that.
Okay, you can live with that.
Yeah. My friend David was the one that dragged me to theaters to see that, because at the time we didn't know they were going to make any new Star Wars movies. That was kind of like, oh, this might be the last time we can see a Star Wars movies in theater. And I went with him, and I remember walking out of the theater after, like, I can't believe you dragged me to that. I mean, I love Star Wars, man, but I would have been okay seeing that at home.
Yeah,
but there's no way you could have known.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things. I was just saying the other day to somebody that it's amazing. When I watched that, I had a whole problem with the whole Snips and Sky Guy thing and the little hutling or whatever, and I just did nothing for me. And by the time Clone Wars ended a couple weeks ago, that I loved everything about Ahsoka and Anakin's relationship and the show and where it went, and they did such a great job with that, considering where it started. It's really it's quite impressive, because yes, I think that may be also on near the bottom of my list as well. So, all right. So, would you consider yourself an Imperial or a Rebel?
It's kind of tough now in the current climate, isn't it? Well, I can tell you before I was
oh, very cool. Full on Imperial.
But that was more not really the ideology, as I felt like being in the military, that just made sense, because one of the nicknames of the Marines were Stormtroopers, so it just seemed appropriate.
All right, so you're technically an Imperial, but you're a Rebel.
Maybe I'm a spy.
Maybe you're a spy.
Yeah, right.
I like that. All right, fourth question: what is your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
Basic blaster sound, I guess. You can't really. Every time you hear it, walking by anything, you'll hear Star Wars playing. Like, oh, I know what that is.
That's a good one. That's an excellent one. All right, who's your favorite droid? R2, 3PO, or BB-8?
That's a tough one. I would say R2. Outside of his rocket jets and oil slicks.
Yes, you and I are exactly on the same page. I still, as cool as it is, it felt like, why didn't you use it again? So
yeah, like, you mean you had this the whole time in the original trilogy? You got to be kidding me.
Think of all the things you could have done.
Right.
All right. So what spaceship or vehicle from the Star Wars universe would you most like to own?
The V-Wing.
The V-Wing. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a deep cut. That's cool.
That is it's such a sleek and cool design, and I just wish they would have done more with it.
Yeah.
It was actually the first 3D model I ever made, was the V-Wing. The first finished 3D model I ever made, and I rendered out a video too. I think I posted on Twitter like a few months ago. I'll send it to you if you want. But
yeah,
it was the very first thing I ever did. I never even made the connection that the first finished CG video I did was a Star Wars related video.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a great call too. Like, I can tell you, in 68 interviews, you were the first one to say V-Wing. So
everyone TIE Fighter, Millennium Falcon.
Everybody's Millennium Falcon. Yeah, Millennium Falcon. Yeah. Followed shortly thereafter by X-Wing.
Millennium Falcon, a hunk of junk.
All right, you have to pick one of these three as your favorite: a Porg, an Ewok, or Jar Jar Binks.
Ewok, that's easy.
Murder bears. Gotta
All right.
love the murder bears.
And
All-
the non-arrow proof armor.
Exactly right. What did that armor do other than make you?
It didn't even look
really
like
cool?
the arrows were flying. It looked like they were kind of gently tossed at him.
I believe maybe the Stormtrooper armor is self-destruct or something because it doesn't take much to get through those. Although, do you play? You ever play the Vader Immortal on the Oculus?
I did.
Yeah,
Yes.
the stormtroopers are a little more menacing in that, even though they still can't hit you, when there's one standing in your face, it's a little bit more. They're menacing, but I'm still, I feel like if I sneezed real hard, I could probably knock them over. So
you know who I didn't expect to be as intimidating, but was Vader. In VR, when he comes up and stands in front of you, and you just look up, and you're like, "This dude is massive!" Like, and he's terrifying.
Yep. Yeah. It changes your perception of him in the movies. It's what's pretty wild about it. And just think, Leia just like was in his face.
Oh yeah. It made me, after seeing him in VR, it made me rethink, like, if I was in her shoes and she's like, "Oh, join me," I'd be, "Oh yeah, sure, no problem. You got it." Where do you need me?
Yeah.
Where do I sign up?
Where do I go? That's right. Exactly. If you could be any character in Star Wars, who would it be and why?
Chirrut Imwe.
Ah, awesome. And
because it's the first time I saw a Star Wars movie and I saw someone with, I know this sounds stupid, but someone that I could actually be as for Halloween, And I'm not even saying, like, I don't want to make it a race thing, because as an artist, I think I'm more of like an accurate costume thing. Where like, right. Captain America's white, I'd prefer to be white if I was going to play Captain America, that kind of thing. So right. Chirrut Imwe was the first one, because I can't grow a beard, so I can't play his pal, So just him. And plus, I'm a big fan of Donnie Yen.
Oh yeah. And I still think that the scene where he just takes on that whole Stormtrooper battalion with the staff is great, and his delivery of the lines is that your foot, or whatever it is he says, is just, it's so great. I love it. He's an underrated character, and it's funny.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say my favorite current Star Wars character is Orson Krennic. So two guys from the same film.
Yeah, I do like him too. He's a likable guy to hate, if that makes any sense.
100%. Yes, absolutely.
Kind of like the what is his name from Inglourious Bastards?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know exactly who you mean.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, this guy's a jerk, but I kind of like him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Orson Krennic is great. But and it's funny. Rogue One is somebody posted online, which do you prefer of the one-off movies, Rogue One or Solo? And I'm a big Solo fan, but I think it depends on the mood. If I'm in the right mood, Rogue One could be my favorite of all 11 movies at times. So
yeah. The only problem I had with Solo personally was I wish they would have picked an actor that looked a little more and sounded a little more like Harrison Ford. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that's like nitpicking. Yeah, but when you see the casting job they did with Mon Mothma for Rogue One, you're like, oh, that looks just like, that's her. Come on. So, I mean, speaking of which, I apologize. I don't know why I do voices whenever maybe it's a voice actor in me. I don't know, but but yeah, it's I wish they would have picked someone that looked a little more like him. I mean, not that I think he did a bad job. I thought he did a serviceable job. Yeah, but ironically, I worked on another one of his movies. Beautiful Creatures.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I worked on that movie, and so when I saw that he was cast as Solo, I remember I'm like, who is this guy? I've seen him somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was an unenviable task. I think that the one thing that I think, not the one thing, but I think one of the things he did really well was the fact that he didn't try to impersonate Harrison Ford, because we then would have spent the whole time on the other side of the fence saying, yeah, it's a bad impression. But yeah, I mean, how do you? That's why they can never recast Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford is he owns those characters.
He's Harrison Ford, right?
Exactly. So, all right.
So, I
cool.
mean, for me, I guess it's like if they were to do a Solo 2, I wouldn't mind if they did something similar to what they did with Looper. Where
Yeah.
they put a little bit of makeup and just kind of like, oh, this is like the middle ground. He's kind of like growing up and looking more like Harrison Ford. And I think being that he didn't try to imitate him in the first film, it might work if they made a second film when he does try to imitate him. You see him like growing into the character that you know.
Right.
But we'll see, right? We'll see if Make Solo 2 happen is a thing.
I hope it happens. I think there's so many cool stories to be told there. I would love to see them make Solo.
I want to see Maul.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I've said this 100 times on my show, but it's so there's been two things in Star Wars since Disney's taken it over where I've gasped out loud, and one was the child in Mandalorian, and the other was I remember sitting in the theater watching Solo, and Maul showed up, and I was like, whoa, and I was the only guy in my row that like said something out loud, but I just love that, and I would love to see more of him. And Ray Park, every time you probably follow him on Instagram, and he's like waiting for the call. He's waiting for the call.
Oh yeah.
I would love to see that. All right, that's cool. All right, so what's your favorite trilogy? The originals, the prequels, or the sequels?
Originals.
Yeah,
I think that's an unfair question for someone. I think most people who have been fans prior to the prequels will all say the prequels. Or have you seen something otherwise?
No, it's interesting is I think a lot of it is the first one you saw, right? So I've had people who grew up on the prequels and they picked the prequels. If you were to ask my 10-year-old daughter, she would say the sequels because that's her set of Star Wars films. So
yeah,
you came into it with the originals, and I think it's hard to beat that. But I would say, easily 70% of people say original trilogy because that's where most of us found it, regardless of your age, right? But the prequels, and then there's people like your wife who say the sequels are, because the sequels are more modern movies, right? So if you're used to right,
the
so
pacing,
if you're used to the Marvel type of films, this feels a little bit more that way. And the prequels, I guess, honestly, I followed Ken Knapsack when he says he's a reformed prequelist, and I had issues with the prequels. I did not love the prequels, and I've come around to them because of the stories that they told. But there's no denying that they're very different types of films. So
yeah. And you see the arguments online too. I saw all these arguments about like, oh, the sequels. The new sequel trilogy sucks and they ruin the lore and this and that, and then you have other people on the other side arguing, well, the prequels are worse, and everybody's got an opinion. And the thing I thought was funny was someone said, well, the prequels didn't destroy any of the lore, and I'm like, are you sure about that? Because according to me, if the prequels didn't, then when he said to Vader, oh, don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotions is ancient religion. He could have just said, it's not a religion. It's science. Midichlorians. Like, exactly. Look on Wikipedia.
My biggest thing, though, is still when the fact that Leia remembers her mother. And it's like, I can't.
I kind of forgive that in the sense that I kind of think of it more of a Force thing. She's like, oh, just images, really, feelings, So I'm like, okay, kind of like the whole people hated the. Oh, here's the thing. So I had no idea what the phrase shipper meant before I worked on episode 9.
Okay.
And I go online and everybody's talking about, oh, you worked on 9? That's cool. I'm a Raylo shipper. I'm like, what is that? Do you ship out items? Or I don't understand what you're saying.
eBay sort of store.
Yeah, so a lot of people hated that kiss at the end. And of course, a lot of people loved it. That's what they wanted.
Right.
But it didn't bother me. And people say, well, it didn't bother you? I'm like, no, because she was dead. If I was dead and Adam Driver brought me back to life, I might kiss him. Like, dude, I was just dead, like cold. So that's the way I kind of take it. And people are like, oh, it's romantic. I'm like, I don't take it that way. I just took it as, holy crap, I'm alive.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like the picture from the end of World War II where the sailor grabs the first woman he sees when he gets into Times Square. Right. It's that same kind of, I'm alive. I've got life in me again. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the way I took it. It was like,
I did too. You know, I'm glad to hear somebody else say that because I am with you on that. I did not take it as, okay, now they're going to go live happily ever after, or she's been in love with him for 3 movies. It was the moment more than anything else. Right?
Yeah.
So.
And then what is somebody was saying like, why did he die after healing her? What was that? And the analogy I came up with is, I'm like, I don't know. The way I kind of look at it is that he Bluetoothed everything to her, but it killed his battery. Hey, let me transfer all these files to you. Oh, wow. Okay, well, that was fun.
Oh, no, battery's at 2%. Oh, man, that's funny. That's cool. I can live with that. Good. Awesome. All right, so the last question is, what is your favorite Star Wars quote?
Well, it's a tough one because it does change from time to time. But there was one I was actually thinking about getting tattooed on me now was do or do not, there is no try.
Mm-hmm.
I actually wanted to add on top of my tattoo because I try to get tattoos. Like, I'm not covered, I try to, I'm pretty conservative with my tattoos, but I try to get something to commemorate important things in my life. So I kind of want to get a tattoo of the silhouette of the Death Star wreckage, the disc, on top of my shoulder, and an Arabesh over it, right? Do or do not, there is no try. As a, since it's a reminder that, it took me a long time, but I made it and I got there. And now no one can take that away from me. And when my daughter's old enough, I can take her to Disneyland and we can go on Star Tours, and it's my work in there too. They took it from the movies and put it in the ride. So even though I didn't directly work on it, those are my pieces, and I can go, Daddy did that. And she can take her kids on it and her grandkids. And I don't know, they'll probably tear it down at that point and make it a new one. But
yeah,
but we're being honest, right?
But as you said, it's you've now got your fingerprint on a Star Wars film, which is amazing. As a fan, it's
it still doesn't feel real.
No, I imagine. Look, it's been 20 years since I wrote for Star Wars Galaxy magazine, and every now and then I'll pick up one of those magazines and see my name in it, and contributing editor or whatever, and I'm just like, that was really very cool. And you're it's important too that like people also recognize what a cool fan you've been on social media as well. You've been very you've reached out to a lot of people, and you've been very very open, and that's really cool. And I want to thank you for taking some time with us today. This has been a blast, just getting to know a little bit more about what went into it and what got you there. So that's very, very cool.
I like hearing your side of it though, with seeing your name, because it still feels like it sounds weird, but it feels like I won a contest and I got to have a piece of something in a real Star Wars movie. It doesn't feel like I'm part of it. It feels like, oh, look, there's a Star Wars movie, but I got to put something in it.
Yeah. Now, do you feel that way about other franchises, or does Star Wars give you a separate sort of feeling?
Star Wars is the only one I've ever had that feeling with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. I never even thought about it. That's a good cry. I never thought about that. I worked on Marvel properties and stuff, and it's not even close to the same feeling, because I guess maybe those other properties are still more recent, but Star Wars has been around since before I was born.
Right.
Everything else I've worked on has existed after me. So it's like, it's like, I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was thinking about that with Star Wars not too long ago, about just how, I technically remember a world before Star Wars, but not really. But there's so many. It's become an institution. It's become more than the movies. It's become, a culture, right? Yeah, it's so much part of who we are as people now, as storytellers. It really is. The phrase modern day myth is overused, but that's exactly what it is. And to have played any part in that at all is really that's a really amazing thing. So.
Yeah. Well, same to you.
Cool. Oh, thank you, man. So where can people find you online so they can keep up with you?
You can find me on my Twitter at Vu Yoshi. That's at VUYOSHI, or on Instagram at Yoshi Vu Art. I also have a website, artificialempire.com. That's more of like my job stuff. So you can feel free to look, but
it's worth checking out because, like I said, the stuff that I saw on there, I was like, that wasn't a camera. That was like developed in a computer somewhere. It's really, if you have any interest in visual effects, you should check out the website as well. So, well, thank you so much, and I hope I get a chance to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, same here. It was a pleasure.